What's up, YouTube? It's Poor Hunter here again. I want to talk today about meat processing and storage. So, there's a couple things you're going to need right off the bat when you're processing meat. It is a good sharp knife, a way to sharpen that knife, and a grinder. Now, knives, you just need a sharp knife, you need something that'll hold an edge, and a way to sharpen that. Processing that meat, that knife will get dull. You want a way to sharpen that up pretty quick. Now, as far as the knife goes, you can pretty much use anything that you want to process that meat. What we use is my father-in-law bought a set of Rapala fillet knives for me for Christmas one year, and they work great. Cutting up that meat, it it'll fillet anything. I've used it for venison, use it for fish all the time, used it for birds, used it for turtle. Yes, I said turtle. Snapping turtle. Good stuff. Um, so just having a really sharp knife. Fillet knives will fillet anything, including your fingers. I've done it a few times. So that is the easiest, cheapest way to go with that. You can find decent fillet knives out there for not a lot of money. Your grinder, we started out with a hand grinder. I remember doing it as a kid. We had a grinder clamped to the end of the table, and you'd crank that sucker and just keep feeding the meat in there and grinding it up. Um, since those years, we have moved on to an electric grinder. Now, you can find cheap electric grinders out there, but they will be cheap. They don't hold up as well. They don't last as long. So if you're going to go the cheap route, either get to or have a hand grinder as a backup. You're always going to want a backup no matter what, because if something goes wrong, you will end up with a bunch of meat that you can't process. You're going to have to go out and get another grinder, or if you don't have the money for it, you're stuck with a bunch of unprocessed meat. So always live the rule of twos. Two is one and one is none. Um, you always want to make sure you have a backup plan just in case. So hand grinders are extremely cheap. I found them online for as little as $5. The problem with that one is it was on Craigslist and it would have cost more in gas to drive there to get it than it would to have just bought a cheap one off of Amazon or Walmart. So hand grinder is a way to go. Just as a backup, I would go with an electric one. You can process that meat a little bit faster that way. Unless you're freaking Speedy Gonzalez and you can just, crank it like a son of a gun. But um, the electric grinders, I would go for a middle of the road one. You don't want to go super cheap, but you don't need a $700 or $800 grinder either. So you can get a decent one for around 50 to $60, I would say. Um, Now grinding it, um, grinding it into hamburger, you can do that with making it into sausage. We can a lot of our stuff. We used to freeze it. Freezing it's a good way to go. We still freeze some because we make sausage. We also, use it for whatever else. My wife made some meatloaf with venison meat, and it was delicious. It worked great. But we always keep some frozen stuff on hand. Also keep frozen roasts on hand. If you're doing the freezing route, if you have the freezer space, I would go with freezer paper. It's cheap enough to buy in bulk. If you're going to do the freezer route, or you want to do the freezer route and don't have one, look on Craigslist, look on auction sites, look on Facebook Marketplace, look at garage sales. I've seen small chest freezers cheap at garage sales as well. Uh, and we got one off of Craigslist. It was actually free, and we've been using that for the last couple of years. It works just fine. If you're gonna go with a freezer, honestly, I would go with an older one than the newer ones. Newer ones are actually getting harder to find sometimes. This last year, you couldn't find them anywhere. Um, so you want to get this stuff taken care of before you actually go out and start bringing home that meat. But this is all stuff you got to think about that goes into taking care of it and storing it. So look for cheap freezers. You can. We bought one once. It was a newer one. I think it was 7 cubic foot, or however they measure it. We started out with a 5 and then got another one along with that. And we got that one. I think it was at Best Buy on sale. It was just under $100, so it was actually pretty decent for that size of freezer. We do have 3 now. We have 2 5s and a 7 for freezer space. But as far as our venison meat goes, we can a lot and make a lot of jerky. Um, your canned venison, you can do it a couple of different ways. Uh, we started out doing canned chunks, and we still do that sometimes. It's really great. You pop the can, heat it up, put it over some mashed potatoes. It's delicious. Uh, you can put those chunks in stews, canned hamburger for chili. We really like the canned hamburger. How we do that is or my wife rather, she browns the meat first and then cans it. You can can it without browning it first, but it is going to cook in that jar and you end up with a big, huge clump of venison hamburger. So that is the easiest way to do it. Just brown it first, throw it in that jar, and throw it in the canner. So with canning, you're going to have some initial costs. You'll have initial costs with everything when it comes to processing meat, but with the canning, you're going to need the canner, you're going to need jars, lids, rings. If you buy the jars by the case at like Fleet Farm or Walmart, they usually come with lids and rings. We always get the jars, lids, and rings. I would stay away from any of the cheaper lids. They don't seal as well, and we've had some issues with those in the past. So we stick to the name brand Ball stuff. Um, but you're going to have those initial costs, and then once you get that stock built up of jars, lids, and rings, you're going to start saving money in the long run because of the shelf life of that meat. With freezing it, you usually have around a year lifespan of that meat. The longer it's frozen, the worse the meat gets. So you get the gamey flavor, and it gets tougher, and it's not good over a long period of time when it's frozen. So that's why we do the canning. With the canning, you get a 5 year shelf life out of that meat. It's already cooked in the jar, and it will last for up to 5 years. It'll actually last longer than 5 years, but the FDA recommends a 5 year maximum. So that's just the way that goes. FDA, everybody regulates everything, so that's the FDA's regulation for canning. So you get a longer shelf life out of it, and a lot of times we end up with stuff left over from previous years. I think we still have some in the cupboard from like 2 years ago. But we rotate it out as we get more stock in there, and you build up that stock of the stuff you need. With a canner, I would also keep the seals and an extra pressure gauge on hand, or just have an extra canner just in case something goes wrong, that gauge goes bad or something. You want to be able to can that meat properly. If meat does not get to the right temperature, or anything doesn't get to the right temperature with canning, you can end up with botulism, and that is very, very dangerous. Um, so with the canning stuff, there's a lot of older folks out there that have passed on, and their kids don't have a lot of interest in it. So you can find the canning stuff online and at garage sales for pretty cheap. They're just wanting to get rid of it. We found a garage sale canner was like $20 last year, and it was like brand new, never been used, still in the box, still had the directions. So the garage sales, I will always say that for cheap hunting stuff, check out those garage sales because you will find meat processing stuff, knives, grinders, jars, canners, vacuum sealers. So definitely keep an eye out for that stuff at garage sales. Sales sites like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, you can find that stuff fairly cheap too. And a lot of times you'll find it on sale. We bought a newer, bigger canner this last year. It was a little under $100 because it was on sale. So keep that stuff in mind for canning. This is one of the products you get from canned venison. is very good. You just screw the top right off, pop the top. This is from canned 11/13/22, so it's fairly new. But that's your product. You throw it on the shelf and forget about it until you want to use it. It is, in my opinion, the best and tastiest way to go. Now, one of the other things you can do with canning that I really like, we learned this year, and I love it. We've used it so much, is making venison broth. We make bone broth from the venison bones. We cut up the bones, we boil the bones for about 15 minutes, and then we bake them for around an hour, I think at 350 or 450. Then after that, we put it in a roaster pan with vegetables and seasonings. Get all those bones in there, fill it up with water, and we cook that for 24 to 48 hours. And this is your product from that. Venison bone broth. You can make soups out of it. You can make all kinds of stuff with it, and it is delicious. The health benefits are great. It's very, very good for you. So I recommend doing that as well. So, with the bone broth, we're saving money that way. We don't have to buy that stuff in the store, and it lasts for a long period of time. This one was also from, this was 2/11/23, so that was this year, this month. But just doing that stuff is a good way to save money. Now, one of the other ways you can store meat is dehydrating or smoking it, making jerky out of it. So there's a few different ways you can do this cheaply. We had some extra money this last year, so we bought a dehydrator, and we've been making a lot of jerky out of that. You can also use the oven to do it. That is probably by far the cheapest way to jerky meat, is using the oven, or over on a spit over a fire. That works just fine. It's super cheap too. But you put it in the oven at low heat, kind of hang it in there after you marinate it. Put it on a low heat and leave it with the door cracked a little bit, and you get jerky out of it. My neighbor that hunts with us, he did it the first time, and it was really, really good. Another way you can do it is smoking it. Smokers can be fairly cheap. They can be extremely expensive too. You really don't need a $800 to $900 smoker that you can link your phone to and set the temperature wherever you are in the frickin' planet. It's just got to smoke the meat. It doesn't have to be extravagant. The wood chips burn, the smoke heats up the meat, and you get a really good, flavorful, dry meat snack. So there's not a whole lot that goes into it. You don't got to spend a ton of money on it. There's different smokers out there: charcoal smokers, wood smokers. You can get some cheaper ones around $100 probably at Walmart, Menards, Fleet Farm. Otherwise, what my neighbor did that hunts with us this last year, he built a smokehouse. Now, he did it the absolute cheapest way possible. He found the wood burner online with the piping on an auction site for super cheap, and then he built the smokehouse out of pallets and scrap sheet metal. It worked really great. He took the tenderloins and heart from the first few deer that we shot, and he jerkied it. It was delicious. We were snacking on it all gun season. So smoking it is a way to go. If you're going to smoke your meat, I would recommend, or dehydrating it, I would recommend you invest in a vacuum sealer if you want that meat to last a while. You can vacuum seal it and then freeze it, or stick it in the fridge. It will last a while longer that way. You just got to get that air out of there to keep it from molding. Otherwise, I guess I would recommend throwing an oxygen absorber in there just to be safe, and then vacuum sealing it. Vacuum sealers aren't too terribly expensive. They can get fairly pricey. You got to invest in the sealer. You got to invest in the bags. If you're going to do that, I recommend you double seal those bags. Do your original vacuum seal, and then put a second seal line on each side of those bags, just to make sure you get no leaks with those seals. You want to keep that meat as fresh as possible and from molding. So those are some of the ways that you can preserve that meat. My recommendation, just invest in a decent grinder and um, invest in canning and a vacuum sealer, because that is your best and cheapest way to preserve that meat for a long period of time. And if you want to prep for the future, that's the best way to do it. We want to put that meat away for those difficult times, but we want it to last a while too. So we go out. This last year we shot like, what was it? Between the two families, our group, there was 4 of us. We got 10 deer between bow and gun season. So we ended up with a few 100 pounds of meat. And so we're putting away meat for a while. We're gonna have meat, from this deer, these deer next year by the time we go out gun hunting and bow hunting again. So that's a good thing. We have food for a long period of time. It could last for 5 years if we need it to. We try to rotate it out as much as we can. If we are starting to get close to that expiration, that 5-year period, we start to give it away. But it is what it is. We got food put away for a long period of time that we have if we need it. If we don't have the money to go out and buy groceries, we have meat in the cupboard and in the freezer. So some things to think about. Hopefully this information helps. Again, check out those garage sales. If you are going to try to save money on this, if you want to do this to put food on the table and prep for the future, but you don't have a lot of money to spend like we don't, you have to do it yourself. That is the only way to save money. You'll always end up with initial costs, but you will save money in the long run, and you will have a longer lasting product, and that is important. So do it yourself. There's lots of tutorials online on how to do stuff. I have watched tutorials on how to do stuff with fish. I had to watch one for turtles. Hopefully we'll get into tutorials in the future for processing. Not going to be in the near future. All the hunting seasons are over. When the fishing comes around and the small game comes around, we'll definitely be doing some stuff on that. I definitely am going to put a video out on snapping turtles. Because I had to watch one, and it is the absolute freakiest thing you will ever do in your life. But once you do it, you'll never forget it, and you will not regret it. That meat is delicious. First time I had it, oh, it was so good. My wife, she made some deep fried turtle nuggets. Oh my gosh, Cajun style. It was amazing. We made some turtle soup. It takes a lot of work to do it. If you got the patience to do it, it is well worth it. So yeah, turtles, amazing, definitely. But yeah, as far as storing that meat, cheapest route to go, in my opinion, for a long period of time is canning. Get that stuff you need to do it, and do it as cheap as possible. Put that money you need away for something better. Put it away for vacation. Put it away for bills in the future. Put it away for getting a new car. Whatever you need it for, or a hunting truck. I did that. I got a cheap 90s crap box pickup truck, so that's my hunting truck. Put that money away for whatever you need it for. That is what this is all about. If you don't have a lot of money, hopefully this stuff helps. And so that's all I got for you. Like, comment, subscribe if this information helps you out. If you have any questions, comment. If you have any, disagree with anything I said, well, feel free to shoot a comment out there. I'll try my best to respond when I can. But we will see you guys in the next video. This is the Poor Hunter. Still be poor, but I won't be hungry. Have a good night.